The latest, ex-rebels want to meet with new Colombia leader file. In this June 10, 2018 file photo, a girl holds a poster of former President Álvaro Uribe, left, and Ivan Duque, current presidential candidate with the Democratic Center Party, during a campaign rally in Armenia, Colombia. Duque, a former senator and Uribe's protege, will face Gustavo Petro, a former leftist rebel and ex-Bogotá mayor, in a runoff election on Sunday. AP photo, Fernando Vergara, file, Bogotá, Colombia. AP, the latest on Colombia's presidential election, all times local, 8:30 p.m. Demobilized members of Colombia's once biggest rebel group say they want to meet with President-elect Ivan Duque to discuss implementation of the nation's peace accord. Ex-guerrilla leader Rodrigo Londano congratulated Duque for his victory in Sunday's presidential runoff election and said Colombians should work together because the road of hope is open. In his victory speech, Duque said earlier that he doesn't want to shred the accord to pieces but also promised to make changes to ensure victims get justice. Many Colombians oppose generous terms for high-ranking guerrillas involved in atrocities, such as allowing them to enter politics and escape any jail time. The former Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia is now a political party. Londano himself ran for president but withdrew his bid amid health complications. 7:50 p.m. Colombian President-elect Ivan Duque says he wants to build consensus and unite the country following a polarizing campaign that laid bare deep divisions over a peace deal with leftist rebels. In his victory speech, Duque hit on the same law and order themes that propelled him to victory in Sunday's runoff election over former leftist rebel Gustavo Petro. Duque promised to modify the 2016 peace accord with the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia without breaking it, putting the victims of rebel violence at the center of any change. He also vowed to attack corruption and to address a surge in cocaine production that he said threatens Colombia's national security. He provided few details on how he will bring about reconciliation other than saying he will work tirelessly on behalf of all Colombians. 7 p.m. The losing candidate in Colombia's presidential runoff election is challenging winner Ivan Duque to break with his hawkish conservative allies and uphold the peace accord with leftist rebels. Otherwise, leftist Gustavo Petro says, Duque will face stiff resistance from the historic number of voters who sided with Petro's candidacy. In a long concession speech, Petro said Sunday evening that he doesn't feel defeated. He declared himself an opponent to Duque's future government, drawing wild shouts of resistance from supporters who gathered to hear the same fiery rhetoric that filled plazas during the polarizing campaign. Petro is making clear he is no mood to heal divisions. He says that if Duque doesn't cut ties with allies like former President Álvaro Uribe, he will face a fight with a newly energized left. 5:50 p.m. Leftist candidate Gustavo Petro is taking his loss in Colombia's presidential runoff in stride, even as his supporters seem dejected for failing to make the race more competitive. Petro went on Twitter to highlight the more than 8 million votes he received Sunday, which is more than any leftist candidate has gotten before in one of Latin America's most conservative nations. He tweets, "There's no defeat here." His supporters gathered at his campaign headquarters, some of them in tears consoling each other as they waited for Petro to deliver his concession speech. Petro lost to conservative Ivan Duque by more than 12 points. Under Colombia's new election law, Petro as the runner-up will be given a seat in the Senate from which he is expected to lead the opposition to a Duque government. 5:35 p.m. Official results in Colombia's presidential runoff vote show electoral authorities understated the turnout. When polls closed Sunday, National Registrar Juan Carlos Galindo said just 44% of registered voters had cast ballots. That would have been one of the lowest participation rates for Colombians in recent memory. But with returns in from more than 99% of polling stations, the reported turnout is 53%, just below the level in the first round of voting 3 weeks ago and the highest in a Colombian presidential runoff since 1998. 5 p.m. Colombia election results show Ivan Duque, the young conservative protege of a powerful former president, it is poised to become the country's next president. Duque holds a 12-point lead over leftist contender Gustavo Petro with nearly 97% of voting centers reporting in a preliminary count. The 41-year-old Duque would take charge of the South American nation from outgoing President Juan Manuel Santos as it implements a still fragile peace accord after more than 5 decades of armed conflict. Duque soared in the polls as he promised to roll back parts of the historic accord with leftist rebels but not shred it to pieces. Duque gained his frontrunner status thanks in large part to support from Álvaro Uribe, the former president who is both widely admired and detested in Colombia. 4:50 p.m. Colombians who support conservative presidential candidate Ivan Duque have begun celebrating even before final results are announced in the country's presidential runoff election. Duque admirers honked car horns and began congregating Sunday around the site in Bogotá where he is expected to receive the final results. A preliminary count of nearly 85% of voting center reports indicates Duque has a lead of 13 percentage points over his leftist runoff opponent, Gustavo Petro. Duque is promising to roll back parts of a contentious peace accord with leftist rebels for ending Latin America's longest-running conflict. 4:30 p.m. Early results in Colombia's presidential race indicate conservative Ivan Duque is well ahead. An initial count of 22% of polling stations reporting shows Duque leading by 18 percentage points over former leftist guerrilla-turned-politico Gustavo Petro in the race to succeed President Juan Manuel Santos. Duque is the protege of influential former President Álvaro Uribe and would become the nation's youngest president in over a century. He is promising changes the nation's historic peace accord with leftist rebels. 4:20 p.m. Turnout in Colombia's presidential runoff fell by almost 10 percentage points from the first round of voting 3 weeks ago. National Registrar Juan Carlos Galindo said after polls closed Sunday that just over 44% of registered voters cast ballots. It is one of the lowest turnouts in a Colombian presidential runoff in memory. 4 years ago, almost 48% of registered voters cast ballots in electing President Juan Manuel Santos. Some said there was a packed schedule of World Cup games involving Brazil, Mexico and Germany that kept many soccer-crazed voters at home glued to their TV sets. Other people may have stayed home out of disgust with the polarized nature of the campaign between the two ideological finalists, conservative Ivan Duque and former leftist rebel Gustavo Petro. 4:05 p.m. Polls have closed in Colombia's presidential runoff election as the nation implements a historic peace deal with leftist rebels. Some voters ran to polling sites in Bogotá to cast ballots before the closure on a day when many people were also trying to fit in World Cup matches. Young conservative Ivan Duque and former rebel-turned-politico Gustavo Petro were vying to lead the South American nation. Whoever wins will inherit a country where coca production is soaring and a fragile peace deal to end 5 decades of conflict remains contentious. Both candidates have vowed to uproot endemic corruption and improve Colombia's economy, but have presented diverging views on how to do so. They also differ on how to proceed with implementing the peace accord. ___12:55 a.m. Crowds of supporters have cheered both of Colombia's presidential contenders as they cast their ballots in a crucial runoff race. Conservative frontrunner Ivan Duque said he wants to unite the country and turn a page on corruption. The 41-year-old also said his victory would allow Colombia to be governed by a new generation. Backers of his rival, ex-Bogotá Mayor Gustavo Petro, chanted "President Petro," and reached out to shake his hand as he made his way to vote through a tight crowd of admirers Sunday. Petro said he believes Colombians want change and that he would win by a considerable margin. ___12:10 a.m. The hopes and fears among Colombians voting in the nation's first presidential election since the signing of a peace accord with rebels are palpable at the ballot box. 38-year-old businesswoman Catherine Kuehler said Sunday she is voting for conservative candidate Ivan Duque because she believes leftist rival Gustavo Petro is a very dangerous person who will do the country much harm. Engineer Luis Alberto Castro said a vote for Duque would mean little change for Colombia, and he cast his ballot for Petro instead. Other voters like Adriana Suarez were filing blank ballots, believing neither candidate is a viable option during a critical juncture in Colombia's history. ___11:05 a.m. Powerful former President Álvaro Uribe is making a strong last-minute warning against leftist candidate Gustavo Petro, who is facing Uribe protege Ivan Duque in Colombia's presidential runoff. Uribe said while casting his vote Sunday that Duque is the best guarantee against Colombia falling victim to destructive socialism in the mold of the country's crisis-racked neighbor, Venezuela. Petro led a groundbreaking campaign a decade ago to expose criminal ties between Uribe's allies and far-right paramilitary groups. Uribe said the conservative Duque and his running mate Marta Lucia Ramirez are the guarantee that will scatter the dangers of social and democratic instability that hang over our fatherland. ___8:15 a.m. Polls have opened for Colombia's presidential election, where voters are choosing between a young conservative lawmaker and a former leftist guerrilla as the nation implements a historic peace accord. Colombians began gathering outside polling centers early Sunday to cast their ballots in a tense runoff between Ivan Duque and Gustavo Petro. The vote comes at a crucial moment. A still fragile peace deal with leftist rebels is being implemented and coca production is soaring. The two candidates have presented starkly different views on Colombia's economic model and whether changes should be made to the peace accord. Copyright 2018 The Associated Press. All rights reserved. This material may not be published, broadcast, written or redistributed.